name is Lillian. You can call me Super if you would like. I am an aspiring author and writer and also someone who absolutely loves Supernatural. So today I want to take you guys on a little bit of a ride of plot elements and world building elements that I think Supernatural should have expanded upon or dropped altogether, because the inclusion of these elements to me bogs down the show and raises questions that contradict staple characteristics of the main characters and or main plot points in the show. And those things will make sense later on as we continue to go over them. So I hope that this video sounds interesting to you, and if it does, stick around because this is going to be a wild ride. So the whole major linchpin of the Supernatural is that they're hunting the thing that killed their mother. This is a big thing. It's introduced literally the first season, first 5 minutes. Their mom's dead. Whatever killed them, they want revenge on it. This is the thing. Okay? Sam was also interfered with by the demon that killed their mom. Sam was given demon's blood. This is a big deal. He was called an abomination. The whole show was basically for the first 5 seasons based off of this. And then randomly, as soon as Sam returns in season 6, his powers are completely gone. And we never get any at all confirmation as to why this is the case. Like, literally just none. This is like a big thing. This was a big thing, is that he was impure, that something about him was wrong always. That he even maybe came back wrong, even from Dean's deal. But this is never like shown to fruition. It's never expanded upon. It's just hinted at and then tossed aside. His powers are gone. Whatever foolery happened to bring his soul back the first time around seemed to work out just fine. Sam's fine, everything's fine, demon blood's gone. Okay, but like this was like this was the whole main point of the first 5 seasons of the show, and you're just gonna just be like, whatever, it's fine. Kumbaya. I don't know, it just feels off to me, but okay. And the next one that we're going to talk about is this is one of the things that just revile my soul. Is that Sam doesn't actually want Dean there with him in heaven.
What? Well, you don't remember, do you? You ran away on my watch. I looked everywhere for you. I thought you were dead. And when Dad came home, that's just for Stanford, isn't it? This is your idea of heaven? Wow. This is like one of the worst nights of my life. I can't control.
So, okay. Let's bring this back, right? For one, we know that soulmates exist, and that, technically speaking, Sam and Dean are soulmates. We don't ever really get clarification on how soulmates work, or why soulmates are a certain way, or this way, that, and how it's decided. We don't have any clue. We do know that it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, for example, John and Mary were not soulmates, but they were predestined to be with each other, if that makes any sense, by heaven. So at that point, like, there's some weird things going on with, like, the fabric of fate and whether or not fate exists. We know that fate is, like, an actual being and character in the show, because we were introduced to that character in season 6, but she never makes an appearance besides one episode, and she's never talked about again, even though Castiel knows her, and she's never, like, no one ever, like, asks about her, or, hey, this fate lady, do you think maybe she could help us? She's just completely ignored, but this is going on something. So, Sam doesn't want Dean in his heaven. This is some of the greatest load of baloney in the entire universe. For one, that's heartbreaking. Dean literally sacrificed everything for Sam, his entire life and his afterlife, and Sam doesn't even really want him in his heaven. He was never truly happy with his family. That's basically what Sam's heaven means, is that all of that, and he was never truly happy with his family, ever. That's kind of horribly heartbreaking, not only for Sam, but also for Dean, who cares so much about family, and stakes his whole livelihood and whole purpose for existing off a family. I mean, I've always had an issue with the way that Dean feels the need to sacrifice everything for Sam, when Sam is way more willing to pursue his own needs and just completely ignore Dean, even sometimes do things that purposely leave Dean in more danger and or more vulnerable. He actually does this quite a bit. It's less egregious when they're younger because Sam is younger and more immature. They're both more immature, but this doesn't ever quite go away. Sam is always less willing to sacrifice for Dean. And I think that this is something that reinforces Dean's feeling that he is not valuable and that his existence isn't valuable. And this desire that Dean has to die and be almost like at peace. It grows even worse, especially when you look at episodes like Red Meat, where Dean literally facilitates his own death in order to just talk to death. And it stands to reason that Sam himself, while he cares for his brother, is more childish in the beginning of the show, but there's something about this scene, the look on Dean's face when he realizes that Sam would rather be alone than have him in his heaven. It is so disturbingly sad, especially when Dean gets that faraway look in his eyes and says, and of course, in a better written show, this could have branched off to be its own complex narrative that goes more in depth about self-worth and self-actualization. In this show, we just left wondering why in the hell Sam is even here, and why can't it just be the Angel and the Dean show? The first world building element up on our list is Jesse Turner. Like, literally just the existence of this character. So there's an episode in Supernatural where the Antichrist basically exists. Now, for anyone who's watched Supernatural beyond season 12, you'll know that there is a character that is basically the Antichrist. Like, in this episode, he's literally Lucifer's son. He's very important. His name is Jack. He's, it's spoilers for the show, but like, he's kind of God. And so you would think in your mind that this must be new ground. No, Jesse Turner exists and we just never figure out what happens to him. So in the episode that he's first introduced in, Jesse Turner is the product of a demon impregnating a woman, basically. Not a particularly important demon, anything like that. He just is, and that gives him all of these powers and access to powers that are way stronger than Sam's powers. So he's this young kid that Dean has to persuade Castiel to not kill. So Castiel and angels and all these other elements are introduced into the story at this point, and as far as we know, demons have no gray area at all. So this is very much so an idea of, can something be born evil? And it's supposed to reflect on Sam's own struggle with if having demon blood given to him when he was a baby, if that also means that he's gonna be evil. And also it reflects on Castiel, because Castiel at this moment doesn't really know if he should trust heaven completely. So there's a lot of different character arcs happening all at once and kind of intersecting and raising some interesting points within the story, within the episode, right? So at first he thinks what is right is just heaven itself, and as he uncovers having spot more and more issues and more deception, he grows more attached to Dean and discovers that maybe heaven isn't right, especially since, as far as everyone else knows, God left the building a really long time ago. So these are like deeper discussions about morality and like the ethics of what these characters do, which is great. We love to see it. So like, the show basically opened Pandora's box with Jesse Turner. It was like, hey, here's a character that by all contention should just be a bad person, but he's a kid. Does he really deserve to be killed because of something that he couldn't ever control? And of course, once again, this reflects directly to Sam Winchester, who is a character who everyone believes needs to die in order to stop the apocalypse. Well, There's the thing, we don't actually know, once Castiel decides to spare Jesse Turner, what happens to him. There is a suggestion that he might have gone to Australia, because there's a little postcard at the end of the show showing, and with like a little circle around it being like, hey, maybe this is where he went. And later on, like very far on, in an alternate dimension version of Sam and Dean, they do mention a Antichrist living in Australia. So there could be a potential connection there. The thing is that...
No battery, please charge.
The thing is that Castiel's son is also the Antichrist. So it's just kind of retreading ground. Why bring back Jesse Turner? What about, like, Jack's particular circumstances meant that Jack Klein was the character that would take place as the Antichrist? And what does that say about the fact that the Antichrist can basically be any demonic creature, but all of a sudden we're going to work on that and make it so that it has to be Lucifer's offspring? It just doesn't quite make a lot of sense, if you know what I mean. So this is one of the things that always gets me, is like, okay, what happened to Jesse Turner, and why is Jack Klein existing when there is an Antichrist that already exists within the show? You'd think there would be more than one of those, but apparently they're just running around left and right. Here's an Antichrist, there's an Antichrist. Maybe you're an Antichrist, maybe I am. And here is another plot point that just kind of floors me, that they never tried to seize the opportunity to revisit, like, ever again after this, and that is the idea of Lisa and Ben, like, existing. After season 6, Lisa and Ben never make another appearance, and Dean hardly ever mentions them. I don't even think that he really does. There might be 1 or 2 lines that address the fact that, you know, they exist. They're just kind of erased and just completely from existence. I'm not sure why. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but they are, and I think it was definitely a big issue, right? So Lisa was a character from Dean's past who Dean used to be with, and they kind of had an on-again, off-again relationship with for a while, right? So Lisa was at least in contact with Dean for a good portion of the time that Dean was in the show. Maybe not like talking every day or whatever, but like she knew kind of generally, hey, Dean is alive, Dean's fine, which is, you know, not what we could say about Cassie, but he ran in and she ran into a lot of people who left her, just been pretty horrible to her and her son. Like, Lisa's been through so much shit, and she is such a kind person. And when Dean sees Ben, you can see for a moment that Dean is almost disappointed that Ben isn't his child. Like, Lisa confirms, no, Ben's not your kid, Ben's some other guy's kid, right? Well, Dean looks like sad in this moment, and that'll...
Hey, so I met Ben. Cool kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I couldn't help but notice that he's turning 8. You and me, you know.
Ask me if he's yours.
No, of course not. He's not, is he?
What? No.
Right. Yeah.
be revisited later, because in season 5, Sam basically tells Dean that after Sam sacrificed himself, that he wants him to go live with Lisa and like have a big happy family, of course, without him, because somehow Sam is always convinced that much like Sam can move on from his family, Dean can. A Dean defender over here getting a little bit sassy for the masses. I don't necessarily think that Dean ever, like, was in love with Lisa. Or maybe he was at some point, and I don't think at the point where he was staying with her, he was in love with her. I just never really got that feeling or vibe, but I did get the vibe that they were just, like, really great friends. and that there was love there, even if it wasn't really this romantic love. And at some point, Lisa and Ben's life is threatened, and Dean decides, instead of keeping them in the life and potentially endangering them, he'll have Castiel wipe their memory so that they'll forget all about him. So we have Castiel, who's very much so complacent in this and allows this to happen and facilitates this. And then we have Ben and Lisa, who are, already kind of mixed up in this, getting hurt, having no decision whether or not they get to remember, and potentially also leaving them vulnerable to anyone who wants to strike out at them. Why no one ever bothered to do so, I don't quite know, because I feel like it would be easy to find Ben and Lisa, since they're just, literally where they were, there's, records of them existing. But to me, the fact that Dean did this, never had to pay any kind of repercussions for this, never had to confront that what he did was wrong, and also the idea of fridging another female character, to me, was just kind of a letdown. I think that these kinds of things are okay if they facilitate further growth and multiple different characters, and that comes to, bite them in the ass later on. And it just doesn't happen. And if you're wondering what fridging means, fridging refers to when a female character is killed, maimed, tortured, any kind of thing like that, in order to facilitate a male's character arc. Lots of characters have, this is very prevalent in the superhero genre, and while it's not quite, Supernatural isn't quite a superhero show, I do think that it falls into this quite a bit with, Joe and Helen, and, we have all these characters that very much so die to just make Dean and Sam continue on for, the family. And at some point, I think that they should have to confront the fact that them making decisions like this doesn't necessarily mean, just because they have the ability to make these decisions doesn't mean that they should be making these decisions. And some of these things don't quite fall on their shoulders. If Lisa had wanted her memories erased, that's far different than, Dean deciding that what's best for them is to have their memories erased, and then to be all put out and upset that he lost, what is essentially his son and a woman that he loved, in some capacity. And then for them to never get the option of staying in this life and supporting him. And I think that Dean deserves that, but also they deserve to have a choice of whether or not that's something that they want to do. It feels empty. It feels very John Winchester-y. And while I imagine that Dean would make this decision, I also imagine that this decision should have had more consequences than just that. I would have been very interested to see Ben or Lisa get re-involved in the supernatural and just be scared because they have no idea what's going on, and also know about these missing gaps and memories in their mind, and always feeling a little bit tortured by the fact that they don't have those missing things filled up. But judging by the fact that, most of all of the bad shit seems to follow the Winchesters, maybe they did get off better than they could have. The next thing that we are going to talk about is Sonny's house and everything that has to do with Sonny. So basically, you might have forgotten Sonny's characters. Sonny is the guy in charge of a group home that Dean ended up in when he was caught shoplifting for food. There is a world of information about this. For one, we know that Dean at least experienced neglect and food scarcity, which to me just shows that John is a piece of poo-poo, basically. I don't know any nicer way of saying that. But, the implications for Dean's childhood is pretty crazy, especially since this is just a one-off episode where we talk about, Sonny, and we discover this, and Sam discovers this? How much does Sam not know? Why are there huge gaps in the traumas that Dean's faced in Sam's memories when Sam was, old enough to know? What is going on?
Huh?
He didn't know about what happened with John when he ran away. He didn't know that Dean was kept in a group home that was actually really nice and where Dean was kind of thriving and like going to school for real, which basically proves that Dean is not an idiot and that he could have done really well in school if he would have just, someone would have just gave him the time of day to do so, which is basically what I've been arguing about for most of education. People aren't really stupid. They just need someone to care enough for and to put effort into teaching them. That's a whole different rant for a whole different day. Let me know if you want to hear about that, because the demeaning of Dean Winchester is a real problem and it pisses me off because Sam seems to be the main culprit of it. Deep breaths. But there is also another part of this whole episode that confuses me, because it's either a canon mistake and or it is suggesting far more abuse than one could originally think. For one, Dean Winchester, when he first gets into Sonny's home, has a big bruise on his wrist, and Sonny asks him, where did he get that? And Dean jokingly says that he was hunting a werewolf, and that's how he got the bruise. But Dean in this part of the story is 16 years old, and Dean didn't ever hunt a werewolf until he was 18. So who left the mark on his wrist? That's never quite explored, but the fact that Dean always seems to ignore and redirect when he's in pain versus when other people are in pain does lead me to suggest that maybe potentially he was covering for somebody else so that Sam Winchester wasn't taken away from them. Especially after being left for 2 weeks without food. Which is kind of horrifying and disturbing, I know. You're welcome. I'm just gonna go out and say it. The Purgatory arc in general was completely too short. Dean should not have, gotten out of Purgatory and us just barely see any of it. I feel like Purgatory itself could have taken up an entire season, and it deserved to, because there's a lot of ground that was covered in this season. For one, Sam tends to be the one that spares the most amount of monsters. And even on the behest of Sam's request, Dean will not spare monsters. Just look at someone like Amy Pond. But Dean is vehemently defensive of Benny. I don't know if it's just because Dean tends to attach himself like a leech to every single person and be like, you are my new creature, you are mine now, and no harm will come to you unless you hurt Sam. That tends to be like a big thing for Dean. I've noticed this. But like, what the heck happened in Purgatory, and how does Purgatory operate? For one, Purgatory is this like in-between state between heaven and hell. It's not ruled by either Chuck or, Lucifer or any kind of other being. What we know is that Eve is the one who rules Purgatory. What happens to monsters when they die in Purgatory? Do they become part of Purgatory itself? Do they cease to exist? Do they go to the empty? Do they go to heaven or hell? Do they return to their human form, soul thing? We don't know. What the hell happened to Benny? Like, seriously, what happened? Like, Dean is capable of finding in the most pure state, his most feral state, Dean is capable of feeling compassion for a monster, and yet for some reason, he's the one that's off his rocker this season. This doesn't make any sense. Make it make sense, please. Somebody make it make sense. Also, Benny deserved better. I rest my case. In this next one, which will be our last one, I'm going to talk about the alternate gods and alternate dimensions of this whole story, right? For one, we learn that there are gods in the show much sooner than one would think. We learn in season 5, basically. We learn in season 5, basically, that there are multiple different gods from different religions that exist, but they're all less powerful than the angels. This is very weird. It feels very odd and very weird for the show to be so centric on the angels and on angel mythology, angel lore, god this, god that, when we know that there's multiple gods and that for whatever reason the other ones only show up every once in a while. to just kind of wreak havoc. And they're never, like, a full-fledged villain. They're always, like, an episodic, one-off, like, oh, we gotta deal with this god, we gotta deal with this god. And it's like, okay, but, like, you're talking about trying to find God. You know that Gabriel used to pretend to be a god, and now you're turning around and being like, you never wondered once, hey, what if God is pretending to be a god? Like, what if God was pretending to be, like, Odin or something the whole time? It feels very odd to me, very centric in this, like, one mythology. This is the true mythology, and all the other ones are not as powerful and are actually just monsters. It feels odd, it feels weird, especially since they could have developed different characters more and more and, like, changed and expanded on that lore, and instead they tried to expand on angel lore, and while doing that and expanding on angel lore, they made angels weaker and less intimidating and less scary, and while doing that, they just made Castiel also less special and less impactful of a character. It's weird, there was a very weird trade-off with that, where as more angels would be introduced, be less powerful, and interact more with humans, more angels would act just like Castiel, and it feels off, and it feels weird. And exactly with that, and that idea of, like, some angels being evil, and some angels being good, and some angels rebelling for good, and some angels rebelling for evil, you have this idea of demons who could potentially be good, Crowley, who's done good things and will just turn around also and do wickedly horrible and bad things, and seem to have regret. Crowley does seem to at least be able to love, because he talks about how much he loves Dean. Whether or not you want to chop that off to being possessive instead of love, I don't know. But it's obvious that demons at least can feel things. We have the demons from Sin City who were in love with each other and went through hell and still remained in love with each other, which is the first time that Dean ever saw the demon be potentially at all more than, we want to kill all things. So you have that, and then you have the fact that Dean, spoilers for season 10, becomes a demon later on in the series, and he's able to, change from being human into a Knight of Hell. First off, we have no idea how the royal structure of hell works. We know that there's Knights of Hell and there's Princes of Hell, and that there's also the 7 deadly sins, but those disappear constantly and repeatedly. And you also have the fact that Dean has all his memories from being human. So what is the difference between the Dean that is a demon and the Dean that is a human? For one, he doesn't do things that are particularly, like, wretchedly horrible. Like, yeah, he acts like not a good person, but there's been humans that have, acted just like that that are fine in the show, at least, like, on the down low, right? So in my mind, it feels weird to me that they were so quick to want to change Dean back into a human, even when Dean explicitly said that he didn't, because Sam had just went through a whole kerfuffle about how it wasn't Dean's job to save him all the time. So Sam thinks, hey, it's my job to save Dean from being a demon, even though Dean as a demon doesn't want to be saved. But he also has all of his knowledge of who he was before and just decided that he doesn't want to be human anymore. And then Sam takes it upon himself to try to cure Dean, despite the fact that Dean's not really posing much of a threat to anybody, even if he's acting a bit like an ass. And you have all of that going on, and instead of trying to reason with Dean, they just lock him up and, like, get angry at him and try to change him. And why was it so easy to change a Knight of Hell back into a human? That plot point felt weird and odd. I feel like it should have been something else. If they wanted to change it back to a human, he either should have completely committed into making Demon Dean bad, or they should have committed to having Demon Dean be this, like, shade of gray in this, like, weird kerfuffle where he tries to maybe even lessen the load of, Sam's whole Demon King thing while trying to put hell back in order the way it's supposed to be, or something like that. It feels like they could have done a lot more with the story if they would have just taken the time to actually flesh it out more and make, the demons and the angels and all the other lore in the stories come together in a more concise and, like, conscientious matter to really showcase the themes of the story, but at this point it starts to get really muffled about what's free will and what's fate, and is a demon truly completely evil, and can an angel rebel for good or bad? If an angel's capable of bad, then that means that a demon might be capable of good, because, you know, if angels can fall, why can't a demon rise? We never know. This is never even suggested by the main characters, even though they do see slight chances. Like, they see this possibility, they see it potentially happening, because there are characters who are demons who act heroically in circumstances. Whether or not you want to chalk that up to bad writing or not, I don't know. I just feel like we deserve better. I just want us to have a better time, okay? But yeah, so that is my quick top things that I think could have been expanded upon and explored more in Supernatural, world building elements and plot lines that I think could have been improved upon to make this whole thing better than it is already. This is not to necessarily say that I love this show. This is one of my favorite shows, but when I see these things, I'm like, yes, this is a not good look. So I'm over here just wanting your opinion. What do you guys think about the show? How do you feel? What was the one major plot point or plot element or world building element in the show that you thought needed to be rewritten, expanded upon, or changed? I personally think that these that I presented to you is a good lineup. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and I shall see you guys later. You guys have a groovy day. Remember that 2 rabbits together, 2 or more rabbits are a fluffle. You could join me. I have 2 rabbits as well. You could join the fluffle. You could be a part of that. You see my eyes? I'm calling to you, basically. Pretty desperately, too. That could be fun for you. You don't know. You haven't even tried yet. But yeah, you guys take care and have a good one. Whatever day you're watching this. Ciao, ciao. Bye. Thanks so much for watching, especially if you made it to the end. I really appreciate it.